When people think of classic Ferraris and the most valuable cars on the planet, quite often they think of the 50s and 60s Ferraris, the 250 Testarossas, the 250 GTOs. Those are the pinnacle of motorsport. They ran at Le Mans, they were the pinnacle brand, and they had the best drivers on the planet. It was a really cool era. And then we got the era of the supercars in the mid 80s. You had the 288 GTO. In the early 90s, you had the F40, then the F50, the Enzo, the LaFerrari, and ultimately now they're coming out with the F80. That ushered in a new era of car collecting. And like a lot of classic cars, they didn't start out strong. The 288s went up, then they went down. The F40s went up, then they went down. But people have realized that this era is here to stay. And it doesn't matter if you have a 250 GTO or a 288 GTO, the big collectors are also looking for centerpieces for their collections. And that's really the story about the modern Formula One car and its rise. And suddenly, you see last week, a Schumacher car just sold for $18.5 million. A Lewis Hamilton car sold last year for $19 million. And they seem to have come out of nowhere. And it's really in the last 10 years that you've seen this explosion. And what's caused that explosion? If you think about it, the world's most valuable cars have always been race cars. You can go back to 1907 and the Mercedes and the Italas and all the great Grand Prix cars from that era are still expensive cars today. Formula One and Grand Prix racing has always been expensive. It's not something new. But like a lot of eras, cars come into their own, and you've got to admit that a lot of it has to do with Drive to Survive. Suddenly it's made all of these cars really cool. And let's face it, they've built hundreds, which is one of the rarest cars, the 288 GTO. Then they built 1,400 roughly F40s. So you're talking about a lot of production cars that have had values climb to $5 million for F50s, for LaFerraris, for Enzos. All of those cars are in that $5 million range. These cars languished for a while, and it didn't make sense. When you really look at it, you have the pinnacle of motorsport, you have the pinnacle brands, Mercedes and Ferrari, and those two brands, if you take them from the 50s, the Uhlenhaut Coupe that just sold for $142 million, the Fangio car that sold 15 years ago for $28 million, the W196 Grand Prix car. Then recently you had the Streamliner that just sold for $52 million. Then you take the Ferrari aspect, Testarossas and GTOs, they're $50 to $70 million cars. Then you look at these, pinnacle brand, pinnacle of motorsports, and then the pinnacle drivers. If you ask today who are the greatest drivers that have ever lived or sat in a race car, you would get guys like Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton. Most people don't remember the name Fangio. People certainly remember the name Senna, as he was certainly, one of the greatest of all times. But the two names that come to mind right now are probably Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton. And those are the two cars that have gotten all the attention lately. So what happens going forward with these cars? Well, if you look at it, there's maybe 30 Formula One Ferraris that Schumacher won races in. That's a really low number. Cars look great, they sounded great, they have great history. I think these cars are going to continue to roll up to maybe GTO numbers, maybe to Uhlenhaut Coupe numbers or W196 Streamliner numbers. So they still have a ways to go. They're super rare cars. So let's have a look at this one specifically. This is a 1999 Ferrari Formula One car that won Imola with Schumacher at the wheel.
Out of the race, I can tell you he's being pushed down the pit lane as Michael Schumacher comes down to the Travado for the last time. Round turn 16, turn 17, to win the San Marino Grand Prix. Fist aloft, a gesture of victory, a wonderful
It was really the beginning of that Schumacher era. You got to remember, he won 2 championships at Benetton, and then he went to Ferrari. And Ferrari hadn't won a championship in 20 years. I mean, they were looking for something, and when they finally got Schumacher to the team, they also got Ross Brawn, and Jean Todt realized that it was a really special chemistry between these two guys. And this car, you could argue, was the beginning of that chemistry when they started winning. They actually won the Constructors' Championship in 1999. You could make a really strong argument they would have won the Drivers' Championship had Schumacher not broken his leg and missed 6 races. They won 6 races that year, with Urban winning 4 of the races, Schumacher only winning 2 because he was off for so many of the races and not in top form even when he got back. The following year, obviously, they won 4 seasons in a row, both the Constructors' Championship and the Drivers' Championship. Pretty much unheard of until Schumacher totally revamped that Ferrari team and made them what they are today. And they haven't had that sort of success since. They're struggling again to look for it. You know, they did it once with Schumacher. They're trying to do it with Lewis Hamilton. I don't think it's going to play out the same way this time. So let's look again. What makes these cars so valuable? Numbers, history, the wins that they got, their pedigree, who drove them. Big difference between an Irvine car and a Schumacher car, and big difference between a Lewis Hamilton car and almost any other driver. And I imagine one day there'll be a big difference between a Max Verstappen car and any of the other cars out there. So where do these cars head from here? Who knows, but I think it's a very interesting time to look at old race cars, and not for what they did on the track, but for what they're gonna do in people's collections, where they're going to become the centerpiece of a lot of collections going forward.
If you want to see more car content like this, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget to visit our website to explore our curated inventory of luxury, classic, and investment grade cars.